Good evening and welcome to this edition of African Football Podcast. Myself, Kwame, Ghanaian writer, broadcaster, journalist, entrepreneur, and podcaster. And in this edition of Africa Football Podcast, we're just going to look through the last 32 of games that have taken place this week. And we look forward to the African teams that qualified for the quarterfinal one's in the quarterfinal already, and there's another one in the last 32. Last 16, sorry. So we talk about last 32 and talk about which African team has made the quarterfinal and which is the other African team in the last 16. All right, so before we get into the show, if you like what you hear, please share to your friends, your family, social media networks, subscribe to Ghana African Focus on YouTube, hit the notification bell, meaning that every time we upload a new podcast, YouTube will notify you. Similarly, look out for Ghana African Focus on Spotify. Hit the follow button, meaning that every time we upload a new podcast, Spotify will inform you. All right, and if you want to donate to the show, help us to continue to bring some fantastic content from Ghana and from the rest of the African world, you please do. You can donate that's $3 a month. You can do that either as a one-off payment or as a monthly subscription. All right, so if you'd like to donate, I will leave you the donate link and how you can donate to the show. All right, so let's get into this week's African Football Podcast, looking at the last 32 and which African teams made it to the last 16. So if you recall last week, I gave a summary of the last 32 and picking my bets as to which African teams will make it to the last 16. And so I did say that come this week, we'll probably have about a couple of teams at most in the last 16, and that's transpired. Okay, so before we actually tell you which teams went to the last 16, let's tell you about the matches that have transpired this week. All right, so the last 32 knockout round is where football becomes like a tactical war. There's no group stage, safety nets, and there's no second chances. One match, win or go home. So Africa entered this round with 9 teams. Yeah, obviously teams were eliminated in group stages. So 9 teams made it to the last 32 and only 2 survived. Okay, so we will tell you how that transpired, okay? So Senegal and the Netherlands. So Morocco v Netherlands. So that was the first game of the last 32 featuring an African team. And, it was a very, as we predicted, a very, very tactical, nuanced game, like a chess game. Netherlands pressed high, dominated possession, and tried to suffocate Morocco's rhythm. And actually, the Netherlands took the lead after 72 minutes with Cody Gakpo. But Morocco stayed calm, they stayed compact, and they stayed disciplined. And because of this discipline and calmness, they're able to get an equalizer in the 91st minute, deep into injury time, when Issa Diop, the defender of Morocco, headed into the Dutch net after a free kick. So, the game went into extra time. No team could get a goal into time, and then it went to penalties, and Morocco held their nerve, and the Dutch didn't, and essentially Morocco won that penalty shootout. I believe it was 4-2. Yeah. So Morocco beat the Dutch and qualified for the round of 16. Now, Ghana v Colombia, Ghana's story is as painful because it was avoidable. And I'll tell you why it was painful. Ghana were very too defensive. Even against, we also worked against England, very, very defensive minded, and played a low line, a back line. And they were able to catch England a couple of times where one of those should have been a penalty. But against Colombia, I think they were too cautious and too reactive. And to supplement what I'm saying, Ghana didn't even say, they did not even get one shot on target. Yeah, that's how bad Ghana was. And if you recall, I said in my preview that this is the worst team Ghana taken to a World Cup. Yeah, so since Ghana qualified in 2006, 2010, 2014, 22, this team, 26, is by far the worst team Ghana's took. Yeah. So Colombia controlled midfield, dictated tempo, and they scored early on after 14 minutes and punished Ghana's, passivity. So Ghana's young attackers were starved. Semenyo, I think, had only one shot throughout the game, and the defensive shape became a cage instead of a platform. So had Ghana taken, and I mentioned this before, some of the diaspora, like Daniel Welbeck, yes, I mean, they may not want it, they may not play for, but at least if you ask him, you won't find out. You won't know. If you don't ask, you won't know. So Daniel Welbeck at 36, I said a great season for Brighton. He scored something like double figures for Brighton this season, right? He could have easily done a good job for Ghana if he'd been called upon. I'm sure he would have played for Ghana because obviously he's late in his career. He ain't going to play for England. And, had he been approached, I'm sure he would have probably, said yes. And also, Callum Hudson-Odoi on the on the left wing, had a very, very good season for Forest, yeah? But Ghana did not approach Callum Hudson-Odoi for whatever reason. So, had those two played or been picked by the Ghana team, I'm sure Ghana would have had more attacking options than they did, throughout the 4 games Ghana played. Yes, they beat Panama, but that was a very late goal. They lost to England and they lost to Croatia. And obviously this game against Colombia, very, very, very poor. And, Ghana, it's not as if they lacked talent. It was that they lacked ambition. They didn't show anything going forward. And that proved itself by the fact that Ghana had no shots on target. So it was a probably easy game for Colombia to navigate. And obviously Ghana was eliminated in the round of 32. So going forward, I think for me, Ghana needs to really regroup. Kills is probably the best man at the moment for the job. He's made Ghana defensively hard to beat. Now he needs to find some attacking talent that can supplement the likes of Antoine Semenyo and also Thomas Asante. Both plays for Coventry. He didn't play too well. I'm not sure. Obviously, he's not a world-class striker. And obviously, he's played in the Championship. So we'll see this year, where he's in the Prem, when Coventry, start playing in the Prem in August. And we'll see what Thomas Asante is made of. But Ghana do need an Asamoah Gyan, a world-class striker. So, if I was Carlos Queiroz and the Ghana FA going forward, that will be my next target to try and get, not necessarily a world-class striker like Asamoah Gyan, but someone who knows where to go and someone that can create chances. Yeah. Now, Cape Verde. Cape Verde made Africa proud. They drew Spain, the European champions, drew Uruguay in a very difficult opposition from South America, and also drew Saudi Arabia, a game they probably could have won. And these 3 draws enabled them to go into round of 16, so round of 32, to play the champions Argentina. Now, everyone thought Cape Verde would get slaughtered by Messi and co. But Cape Verde, for me, has been the standout team of the African contingent. Even though they didn't qualify for the last 16, they played a fantastic game against Argentina. They executed one of the best game plans of the entire round. They were compact, disciplined, intelligent, and fearless. They defeated Argentina, yeah, for long periods of the game, even though Messi scored a great goal to begin with. And, obviously they equalized Cape Verde. Argentina went back 2-1. And then a stunning goal from Jose Garcia. Brilliant goal. One of the goals of the tournament, going back to 2-2 for Cape Verde. And they then went in extra time. And they matched Argentina with intensity. They matched Argentina's organization. And they matched their bravery. So Cape Verde lost because of a deflected own goal. It was a free kick that Messi took, and I think it took a deflection off one of the Cape Verde defenders. So, Argentina were very lucky. If it should be said, Argentina were very lucky to get away with beating Cape Verde. And like I said to you, right, football is a funny game. Anything can happen. And for me, if Cape Verde beaten Argentina, it wouldn't have been a shock, because Cape Verde proved themselves in this tournament that they can play with the best in the world. I mean, if you can draw against the European champion Spain, if you can draw against a tough South American team, Uruguay, and if you can draw against one of the best teams in Asia, Saudi Arabia, then there's something about you. So I was very, very impressed with how Cape Verde played. And going forward, and also the keeper, the 40-year-old keeper, had a fantastic tournament. Yeah, made some great saves, and even in the Argentina game, kept Argentina at bay with a couple of great saves. So going forward, I think Cape Verde, they should really use this tournament, right, as a stepping stone, like Morocco did 4 years ago, to try and go far in AFCON. I think on this evidence, Cape Verde can win AFCON. The next AFCON is 2027. Yeah, I don't see no reason why Cape Verde can't win the next AFCON. Why? Because of what the discipline, the intensity, the organization, their bravery, and they never say that attitude that they're showing in this World Cup. If they take that to the AFCON qualifying rounds, they should qualify for AFCON. And if they do reach AFCON 27, that's going to be held in Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda. I think, based on this World Cup, Cape Verde will be one of the favourites to win AFCON 27. So Cape Verde have done Africa proud, and we hope that this is not just a fluke, but it can start. It can be the beginning of a great period for Cape Verdean football. And don't forget, there's no big stars in the team, unlike many African teams like Morocco, Egypt, to a degree, Ghana, to a degree, obviously, Cote d'Ivoire, etc., who have got players that play in the Premier England, that play in Ligue 1 in France, that play in the Bundesliga in Germany. In Cape Verde's team, there's no stars. None of them play in England. None of them play in Ligue 1. None of them play in the Bundesliga. They're playing lower leagues in Europe. So it shows you that you don't need great stars, but a team that's organized, a team that's unified, a team that's together, a team that's disciplined, right? Shows you how far it can go. So for me, Cape Verde did the content proud, and going forward, like I said, Cape Verde should be looking really and truly at qualifying for AFCON, even probably going far in that tournament, and also qualifying for World Cup 2030. That, by the way, which will be held in Spain, Portugal, and Morocco. Now, Ivory Coast against Norway. So Ivory Coast took the lead, and they outplayed Norway for long periods of time. They kept Odegaard and Haaland, Norway's two main strengths, quiet for large parts of the game. However, football's all about moments, and the stunning equalizer by Musa, flipped the momentum in favour of Norway, and Norway won the game in the last 4 minutes with a fortunate goal. Haaland just tripped, bounced the ball into the net after a cross. He didn't even know where the ball was coming from. So, that fortunate Haaland goal gave Norway the win against Ivory Coast. I was very, very disappointed taking that, because Ivory Coast outplayed Norway. They played a better football, but Norway were more clinical, took their chances. Ivory Coast have had 3 goals before Norway scored. So Ivory Coast have done well again in this tournament. Beating Germany. Losing to Ecuador. They won 2 games, losing to Ecuador, and I think they also beat another team in their group game, but they lost to Ecuador. They beat Germany, and also they beat another team. I can't quite remember who they beat in the group, but Ivory Coast played very, very well in the group stages, and also in this knockout game against Norway. But just those 2 chances that Norway took were more clinical. Yeah, And so I expect Ivory Coast again to going forward to qualify for next AFCON and be one of the favourites for AFCON in 2027, and also to do a strong qualifying roundup to qualify for the next World Cup. Now, of all the games, the next one hurt me a lot. Senegal beat Belgium. Senegal were 5 minutes away. They were 2-0 up. 2-0 up. Yeah. But they were 5 minutes away from knocking out Belgium. And I just say to you that if they keep De Bruyne quiet, right, and play the game to their strengths, Senegal could beat Belgium. So Senegal played Belgium for most of the match. Intensity, physicality, transitions, everything. Yeah. Against the aging Belgium team. They led, they controlled, they dominated. And 5 minutes, they were 2-0. Just 5 minutes to go. They were 2-0 up. But then, I don't know what happened, whether it was complacency, whether it was arrogance, whether it was, whatever. Belgium, against them to play, scored twice in the last 5 minutes until the game into injury time. Yeah? And then you would see them score the penalty to win the game for Belgium. So Senegal, they have let this one sit, because if they're beating Belgium, they played USA in the last 16, and they're capable of beating USA because USA aren't particularly that good, especially with their main man Balogun suspended for that game. So Senegal have let a massive chance slip by that they could have made the quarterfinal. They could have made the quarterfinal. They would have beat America. Didn't think America's strong. And they would have made the quarterfinal. So Senegal would kick themselves for not being resolute, not being disciplined, not being organized for the last 5 minutes of the game against Belgium, and allowing Belgium to win that game 3-2. For me, it was a kick in the teeth, because Senegal deserved to beat Belgium. Now, Egypt and Australia. I said that Egypt to win this game, but I didn't know that it would go to penalties. So, Egypt dominated the game. Australia had very, very few chances. And that's Australia's equalizer was an own goal by one of the Egyptian defenders. So, Australia could not break Egypt down. And Egypt showed quality, controlled the game, controlled the rhythm. And, they could have won the game in normal time, but they went to penalties. And, penalties is a lottery. But eventually, Egypt won 4-2 on penalties, going through to the last 16. And ultimately, DR Congo v England. I thought, because I did say it may be Senegal, but we did say maybe Senegal will play England. But it was DR Congo that played England in the week. And DR Congo actually shocked England. Yeah, because everyone thought England would just win 2-0, 3-0. But DR Congo shocked England, right? They pressed England. They disrupted their flow and their rhythm. And they created real chances. And actually, DR Congo took the lead, I think, in the 20th minute. Yeah. But DR Congo, again, similar to, La Côte d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast. But Congo were 15 minutes away from beating England. But come with the hour, come with the man. Harry Kane, yeah, his great season at Bayern Munich has continued into the World Cup. He scored 2 goals, yeah, to break Congolese hearts. So, DR Congo, again, for me, another surprise package of the African contingent. For me, like, the best is Cape Verde, and I'll take, DR Congo to be third after Senegal. Yeah. Well, we all knew Morocco would get through. We all knew Morocco, because I did say Morocco would be the African team that will go through. But those who were not prepared to go through, yeah, DR Congo, and particularly Cape Verde, for me, they impressed. So DR Congo, if you recall last week, I said that they needed to beat Uzbekistan, and they were training in that game, but they came back to beat Uzbekistan 3-1 to get this plum tie with England. And they did not disappoint. Like I said, they're 15 minutes away from beating England. And so, DR Congo should take great heart from the tournament. They had their first tournament in the World Cup for more than 50 years. And they did very, very well in getting onto group stages and taking England virtually all the way. So again, going forward, I expect DR Congo to kick on from this and qualify for next AFCON and be one of the contenders to win the AFCON and hopefully qualify for the next World Cup as well. And finally, Algeria. Well, Algeria did well to get out of a tough group as one of the best third place teams. But this game against Switzerland was a game too far for Algeria. Switzerland are very organized and disciplined and too strong for Algeria. Even though Algeria had their moments, Switzerland controlled the match, dominating midfield, and won comfortably 2-0. It could have been even more, but Switzerland were comfortable in that game. Algeria never imposed themselves, and they couldn't match Switzerland's quality and discipline and organization. So Algeria went home. So in closing, Africa entered the last 32 with 9 teams. We told you that South Africa got eliminated very early on, but only 2 survived: Morocco and Egypt. Yeah, 7 fell, but most of those fell fighting. Cape Verde pushed Argentina all the way to extra time. DR Congo pushed England to the brink. Senegal were minutes away from eliminating Belgium. And Ivory Coast outplayed Norway for long stretches. Yeah, so for me, Africa didn't fail. They fought a great fight and they fought to the end. But were just denied by, maybe complacency or particularly Senegal and Ivory Coast. Yeah, DR Congo and Cape Verde did very, very well, did content proud. And so there's 2 African teams, in the last 16, Egypt and Morocco. And Morocco played again tonight. They played Canada, and they won that game 3-0. I knew they'll beat that game. So now Morocco continue their great pedigree. They were semi-finalists 4 years ago, and they're now quarter-finalists this time round. And they will play either the winners of France against Paraguay. That's going on as this has been recorded, and I can give you the latest score before we close. So the current score after 37 minutes in Philadelphia is Paraguay 0, France 0. So if you look at the match stats, France have had a lot of possession. So France has had 80% possession compared to Paraguay 20%. France have had 3 shots compared to Paraguay's 2. One of us has been on target, and Paraguay have found a shot on target. So France has totally dominated this game, and Paraguay are being very defensively minded, of course, because they can't match France for attacking flair. And so Morocco will play the winners of either France or Paraguay in the quarterfinals in the week. Obviously, Egypt are going to play United States to see if they can make the last quarterfinal, and we'll bring you that in the show next week as well. So we'll talk about Morocco. By that time, they probably would have played the quarterfinal, but we'll also tell you about Egypt as well, how they fared against the USA in the last 32. All right, so Africa sent 9 warriors into the last 32. Only Morocco and Egypt survived. However, the story isn't defeat, it's evolution. Africa is learning fast. Africa is improving fast. And so, in the last 16, 2 nations carried out of the continent. And as I mentioned already, Morocco already in the quarterfinal by beating Canada 3-0. So we'll see what Egypt does in their last 32 game against the United States. So that's it for now. Stay locked in. This is African Football Focus, and the journey continues. And we'll be back next week for some more Africa Football Podcast.